Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for coming along to today's training session. This is a part of the PMS or Performance Management System 2018 rollout, NONTA's new PMS. And this specifically is the implementation training for unit managers being yourselves. My name's Dorothy Pawlowski. I'm from HR. Could I, even though we do know each other, ask you just briefly introduce yourself and tell me what department you're from?
Daphne from Business Services.
Thank you, Daphne. And
I'm Nathan from Customer Services.
thank you so much, Nathan. Welcome, and I hope that we're going to have an informative and valuable session today. So why are we here? I'll give you a little overview of the training outcomes. On completion of this session, we should be confident in implementing PMS 2018 as a supervisor or manager, have some tools to accurately monitor and evaluate performance, confidently address performance issues in context of legislative and organisational policies plus HR policies, support our reports with drafting SMART goals. We'll talk about what SMART goals are a bit later, and development objectives, and monitor the progress of our reports against those goals. How will we do this? We will learn about PMS 2018 and how to monitor, as I said, performance and evaluation, appraisal and evaluation, some tools and some strategies to help us do that effectively. How to identify underperformance and high performance. So what are the ways that we would objectively classify somebody's performance in terms of not making the criteria or meeting the criteria and going above and beyond? How to recognise and reward performance. How would we develop meaningful KPIs and objectives? How to give and receive feedback, probably one of the toughest parts of being a supervisor. And how we would actually go about addressing underperformance should it come along. So, I've done a little bit of talking. Now I would like to just have a little check-in with you. PMS 2018, NONTA's PMS 2018. Could I ask you, Daphne, what you already know about it?
I don't think I've encountered this particular idea before.
Okay, that's interesting. And Nathan?
No, I've heard the name been bandied around. Everyone's sort of saying, "Oh, it's coming soon." So I don't really know that much.
So you've heard a little bit about it, but no detail.
Yeah, no. You know, it's supposed to be very good.
Okay. Can I check in with you what experience you've had perhaps of other performance management systems at other organisations, for example?
Well, I've had a lot of experience of the system of no system.
Okay. All right.
I can't say. I mean, I'm sure that there was a performance management system in place already, but didn't seem to get used systematically.
And Daphne?
I have a very small team, so I like to just get to know them really well so I can identify when they're in trouble or when they're doing alright.
And you haven't undergone performance management as a team member or as a supervisor, implemented a performance management system in a previous role?
Not as a supervisor. I believe as a team member I've probably encountered a few, but
yeah, I
don't really know what they're called. Or
sure. Okay, that's great. Thank you very much for that. And Nathan, other experience from other organisations as a team member perhaps? Have you undergone a performance management or performance review?
Well, I've been performance managed,
right,
but it didn't seem very systemic to me.
Okay, that's interesting. All right, so let's talk about NONTA PMS 2018. Why do we need it? As it says there, I'll read it out even though I'm sure you can read it as well. To manage the performance of people in the workplace, to assist in the achievement of organisational objectives by developing the capabilities, skills, knowledge and behaviours of individuals through recognition and reward of excellent performance and identification and management of underperformance. Does that make sense as a one sentence statement describing what it is we're here to do today? And what do you think about it philosophically? Is that the type of thing that you would expect a performance management system to be for?
Well, this is what one does as a manager, you know. And this is how one manages the team, I think.
Okay, great. Thank you. So an overview of how it's actually going to work. It's an annual cycle, and because of NONTA's business model, we've decided to work from April to April of each calendar year, because that reflects the periods of time that make most sense in the work that we do. There'll be 4 meetings across that year. Now the 4th meeting is actually doubled up as the first meeting of the next period, so as it says there. Who has to do this? All continuing and contracted staff, as per the enterprise agreement, must participate in PMS 2018. Casual staff are optional, so they can participate if they want to, but I really encourage you to in turn encourage your casual reports to participate. Nathan, you're looking a bit troubled. Do you have a question?
No, I was just thinking about the 3 is one. Oh, the 4 is also one. I was just
okay. Sure.
thinking about that.
Yeah, so basically 1 and 4 are the same, but because we're starting off a brand new cycle for this year, it'll be just objective setting. Any other questions at all? No? So let's break it down a little bit. Meeting 1 in April, what are we going to do at that meeting with our reports? We're going to set performance and development objectives, focusing very much looking at the future. So PMS 2018 is very much a forward thinking exercise, but of course there will be review, so it's part of a continuous improvement cycle. We're going to review the key performance indicators that we come up with our reports against the position description. We'll have a look at the performance and development objectives that the team member has brought to the meeting in draft form. We'll agree on those objectives or work on them together and agree on a final plan for the upcoming year. Also at the meeting we'll provide evidence-based feedback on that staff member's performance. We'll ask them to give us feedback about our role as their supervisor and also the support that they're receiving from us. We'll sign off on the final plan and we'll store it as per the NONTA PMS protocols. Seems straightforward enough? Okay. Meeting 2, what happens at meeting 2? We bring along a copy of the plan and we have a look. We review the progress against the objectives that we agreed on in meeting 1. We review that progress by considering performance against the KPIs that we came up with. Excuse me. We discuss whether the objectives and or KPIs require modification. So if it becomes evident at that first meeting that we're not meeting or making any progress against those objectives, perhaps those objectives need modification. Perhaps the key performance indicators or other measures that we've come up with to, as a guideline for whether progress is being made are not realistic or relevant, or they are actually very difficult to measure with. So there may be some modification required, and if so, we would document any required changes, record any observations, and store a copy of the modified plan as per the protocols. Meeting 3 is quite similar. So the reason that we have 2 review meetings during the cycle is because one in the middle of the cycle, which I've experienced myself as part of other organisations' PMS systems, is really not enough. By the time you get 6 months down the track, you've sort of lost half the year, and your ability to modify the plan or identify any retarding factors to progress against objectives, you kind of miss some opportunities there. So it's very similar. We'll still consider the progress and we'll discuss any hazards that are, as I said, retarding progress. Modify the plan if it needs be. Any opportunities that have been identified through the process, which sometimes happens. For example, an objective might have been I wanted to know more about other departments' work, and an opportunity came up for a shadowing exercise or a secondment in another department in the meantime since my plan was drafted, so we can discuss any of those sorts of opportunities that relate to the original objectives. Again, documenting any required changes and uploading or storing a copy of the modified plan. Any questions so far? I feel like I'm talking a lot, so if you do have a question, just butt in. The final meeting, the final review for the period. So we'll look at everything that we discussed in the previous 3 meetings. review what worked, what didn't, and then set objectives for the new cycle. So that's where the combination of the final meeting and the new meeting for the next cycle is. And we'll analyse the objectives that we drafted, the KPIs and the strategies, to see what, if anything, went wrong. Were the objectives met? Were they realistic? Were they smart? Which we'll talk about again. I keep putting you off, it's like I'm building something up, but we will talk about smart objectives. Consider why objectives may not have been met. So did you as a supervisor provide the support or the access to resources? Were the resources available in the first place from the organisation? Was it a reasonable expectation that we could have provided that level of support? Provide and solicit feedback again, and document the final meeting as per before. Okay, it's your turn again. So, performance evaluation. If I could ask you just to think about these questions here. So, how do you monitor performance of your reports? How often do you do that? What do you record? Where and how do you store it? And what do you use it for? Jump in.
Well, I mean, it's very busy, isn't it? You know, the work is very busy, so one kind of, it's only if you become aware, really, of there being a performance issue that, you know, you kind of actually, what I find for myself, I mean, it's difficult to actively monitor performance unless it's, you know, becomes something that I have to include in my workload. And then, you know, I probably will keep some notes. I'll keep notes that I'll store on my computer, you know. And it lets me sort of, I'm able to go back over them and just recap on where we've been, you know, with a particular staff member. And, you know, if I am having a meeting with them, I can go back over the notes and, you know, familiarise myself. And
so you are keeping some sort of notes? Just ad hoc, and is that sort of on a regular time frame? So every week you update some notes?
No, it's more, you know, if I have to speak to someone, I generally will note what I've said to them.
Okay.
I found that quite useful to be able to refer to, look, you know, on the 12th of March we had a meeting and you said blah, blah, blah.
Okay, that's good. And Daphne?
I like to check in with everyone in my team every couple of weeks or so, just to make sure there's no problems, and if there is, I write it down in a notebook and make sure to check back with that later. Okay,
so it's an informal but regular sort of process, and these one-on-ones with each person?
Yeah.
Sure, great, that's quite a good technique as well. So performance evaluation, here are some techniques that you can use, and I've got a handout for you as well. So this is not an exhaustive or definitive list by any stretch of the imagination. I encourage you to research it further, and also to adapt whatever works for you and whatever is appropriate to the work of your team. So some techniques perhaps are very quantitative. So if you were supervising people on an assembly line, they might be the sorts of techniques that would be suitable for that environment. But here's some others. So comparative, how does one team member compare to other team members? Perhaps a little bit narrow. There are pros and cons. What do you think about comparative performance evaluation?
Well, it seems like it would be a little bit divisive.
Could be. It could be divisive. It also fails to perhaps take into account individuality and cultural context.
And what if all of your team are performing poorly? Then, you know, it doesn't do any good to be the best performing in a badly performing team.
Well, I will throw that one back on you as their supervisor, but we can talk about that later.
Well, okay. I'm only just speculating.
You sure? Absolute evaluation. So instead of comparing someone to somebody else, you're actually comparing their performance to key performance indicators.
That seems a bit safer.
To the requirements of the role, I agree, it does seem a bit safer. There are different ways of measuring that. So there's narrative reports, which sounds like what you're doing informally, Nathan, writing down observations or records of meetings that you have. Critical incidents, so they can be, it does sound a bit negative, but it could be a positive thing. If perhaps in your business services team or in your customer services team, Nathan, when a customer comes back with extremely good feedback about someone, that's a critical incident that you can write down against the person's record. And graphic ratings, so scales, and you would normally map that to their position description, that these are the tasks they do each day. Did they do them consistently, extremely well, badly, that kind of thing. Objectives based, so measurement of output. So as I said, that might work well in a business where a worker's performance can be measured per unit of output. Or perhaps in IT services where you get through so many service requests in X amount of time. And direct index, which is qualitative and quantitative criteria plus impersonal criteria. So you're factoring in perhaps performance against key performance indicators, but also things like punctuality, absenteeism, tangible, measurable parts of the job. So considering the pros and cons of each, which one of those, any of them grab your fancy? Which one would work best for your team? It's not something you have to think about or have an answer to right now, but here's a handout with a couple of examples. This one's a narrative assessment with critical incidents on one side, and then on the other side a rating index with a direct index as well. So sort of combinations of both. So key performance indicators are the basis of performance evaluation, and why do we need them? So they provide the standards against which we can measure the performance, and that comes back to your objectives-based performance management. How do we develop them? Okay, that can be tricky depending on your work, and that's something as a supervisor I encourage you to think a lot about. However we develop them, they should align to the role description. You can't develop a key performance indicator about how well somebody feeds cats when feeding cats is not part of their job description. It should also align to organisational and team objectives. So organisational plans, team plans and the organisation's strategic plan. They can be qualitative or quantitative, depending on the role, as I said, for example, number of units produced or feedback received. Can you think of any others? Perhaps in your customer service unit, Nathan.
Well, I guess it would be number of inquiries that are finalised in one interaction.
Okay, great. And what about from an administrative perspective, Daphne, in business services? Couldn't think of any?
Not particularly.
What about perhaps the amount of time it takes to write up minutes or something like that? So there could be, for somebody whose job that is, processing those minutes in a timely fashion and getting them distributed to the meeting attendees within X number of days. That could be a good key KPI for your team. Who should develop KPIs? The people that know their own job the best are the people who are doing that job and their supervisors. So it's collaborative, or should be a collaborative approach to developing KPIs. So we've talked a little bit about what KPIs are used in your team, or what KPIs could be used in your team. So for you, Nathan, how are you monitoring your staff's performance against their key performance indicators? Again, is it just an observation?
You just get a feel for people, I think.
Sure. So these performance appraisal tools could help you make that a more formal process, or a more perhaps rigorous process. And rigour in evaluation and appraisal makes for sound performance management discussions with backup should, sadly, something go wrong in the relationship from a workplace perspective.
Yes, it's more objective.
So you don't have any formal KPIs drafted at this stage?
No.
Okay. Setting objectives. So this is very much relates to the first PMS meeting. What is an objective? So it's a desired state, it's a criterion or a set of values, qualitative or quantitative, that we haven't yet obtained, something we're working to. Why do we do that? Why don't we just flop along and do our job every day according to what's in the position description? We do it because it provides direction to develop our work performance and professional capabilities in line with team and organisational, operational, strategic objectives. There should be a mutuality in the employee-employer relationship. It's the 21st century, and I think there's an expectation, a belief perhaps, that we should be getting something more as employees than a paycheck at the end of a fortnight out of this relationship. And research has conclusively shown that employers get something more out of the relationship if they're investing time in developing you and monitoring your performance and encouraging you to stretch yourself. So who should set the objectives? Again, like KPIs, people that know the role best, the team member and supervisor collaboratively, and when? In time for the first PMS meeting. So here we finally get to the wonderful, magical SMART goals. Objectives must be aligned to the role description, organisational and team objectives. So SMART, basically, I'm sure it's an acronym you've heard before. They must be specific, it must be well defined, it must be measurable. There's no point in setting a goal that you cannot evaluate at the end of the PMS or during the PMS cycle. It must be achievable. The resources must be available, or support will allow for success. Resources can be made available. It must be realistic so that the likelihood of success is high, and it should be time framed. By this date I will have done this, and it should be trackable so we can monitor progress during the PMS. It's a very old concept. I think it dates back to the 50s, but it's definitely a valuable acronym to bear in mind. So that brings us to feedback. As I said, it's my opinion that it's one of the more difficult parts of being a supervisor. Sometimes it's one of the wonderful parts of being a supervisor, when you get to sit down and light up somebody's world by telling them how great you think they are, and particularly when that's evidence-based. It's not just my personal opinion of your personality, but here we go. So why is it important to give feedback? What techniques do you use to give feedback, and what worked, what didn't, and how does receiving feedback make you feel? And that's one that I really want you to have a think about. So starting with you, Daphne, why do you think it's important to give feedback?
Feedback lets my team know what they're doing well and what they need to work on, and it's very motivational to be told that you're doing something very well. And if I let them know that there's something I want them to change, or if they need to work a little harder in one particular area, they tend to get on that very quickly and
excellent.
do that well.
Sounds like you're all over feedback. And what about you, Nathan? Do you have any feelings about why is it important, or any techniques?
Well, I think if you're supervising staff, then you have a responsibility to them, to let them know how they're going, how they're performing. If they're not performing up to standard, and you haven't, given them feedback on that, then you're responsible, for that situation. If it has negative consequences for that staff member, that's your fault as a supervisor for not providing them feedback.
Excellent. Okay, and just really want you to focus on how, if you've ever have you ever received feedback? And how did it make you feel? The person, when that person delivered that feedback to you, do you think they did it well? Do you think
it's hard to take. It's hard to say, isn't it? Some things are very difficult to hear, no matter how they're delivered, and feedback, professional feedback, is one of those things that's going to be difficult to hear. I think if you're not doing a good job and weren't aware of it, that can be quite galling.
Sure.
And if you were doing a good job, it's a bit embarrassing, isn't it, really, if people give you positive feedback.
Okay. So feedback, there are lots of techniques. Again, this is something that people have thought about for a long time. Whatever technique you prefer to use, please remember that feedback to somebody who works or reports to you should be based on your own observation, not what you heard from somebody else or not what you're supposing they get up to. It should be specific, clear and concisely delivered. It should be impersonal but definitely empathic. As you just said, it can be difficult to hear it, even if it's positive feedback, so bear that in mind. It should only relate to the job performance and, as I said, observed behaviours related to the role. So there's no point in giving feedback to somebody who's saying you're a lousy football player, lift your game, when they don't play football in your team. Okay, and also something that you should really consider is the cultural context when you're delivering feedback. Okay, here's a handout for you. These are feedback models. There's three here. The feedback sandwich, have you heard of that one? Or sometimes called the feedback hamburger. The beer model, that's particularly good for addressing difficult workplace behaviours or underperformance specifically. And the Pendleton feedback method. So there's one for you, Nathan, and one for you, Daphne. Please take those away and use them at your own discretion, in your own time.
I see there's not actually beer involved.
No, I'm sorry, Nathan, there's no beer involved. Okay, so what we're going to do is, I'm going to ask you to do a role play now. The instructions are, you pair up. Yes, it got to that point. Pair up, take a scenario, prepare very, very quickly. You can take a couple of minutes to think about what you're going to say. So one of you will deliver, one of you will receive, and then you'll swap. Think about very briefly what you're going to do, and we will give you feedback. The receiver will give, and I will give feedback to the deliverer in each instance. So if I could get you to step up here, and here are your, I think they're on the back of the sheet that I gave you. Oh, here they are. So there we go. There's one for you, Daphne, and one for you, Nathan.
Right. Which one do you want?
Do you want to flip a coin?
Well, I'll be Trent.
Okay.
And you can be Quinn. So.
Alright, so who's going first as deliverer?
Do you want me to go first?
Can I get you to
Quinn.
step up here then?
Says here, Quinn has highly developed communication skills and consistently demonstrated exceptional level of patience. For the past few months, we've noticed that Quinn has developed a pattern of late attendance, often coming into work 10 to 15 minutes after scheduled start time. I think I've got some staff like that actually. Has actually recorded, bring this to attention. Focus on urgent performance management meeting. Plan how you'll provide feedback to Quinn. So we're supposed to role play.
You're providing feedback to Quinn, and Quinn, be honest. You're Quinn. How do you feel about this? You know, consider whether you knew that you were late every day, or whether it's coming as a complete surprise to you.
Thanks for coming in. Look, I just wanted to have a bit of a chat to you. You know, first of all, let me just say, you know, it's really obvious, you know, from observing your work and the feedback that I've got from the customers that you're doing a fantastic job out there. You know, there's a lot of really, you know, from what I can see, you really go the distance with callers and make sure that they get the results they're looking for. So I just wanted to establish that off the from the start. There has been a few people kind of noticing. I think that you know, I seem to have a little bit of trouble getting started in the morning. Like maybe sometimes you're a little bit late. Are you having any trouble at the moment in getting to work and with your commute or anything like that?
The bus I take is really inconsistent.
Right. Oh, so is there an earlier bus maybe that you could take?
I think so, but it's quite a lot earlier.
Yeah. Look, unfortunately, you know, when we, you know, because we are a customer service team, then, you know, when we say a 9 o'clock start, we kind of really need you to be here at 9. So, look, you know, you do such a great job. You know, it's a shame that you know, to let something like this cast a, you know, a shadow over your performance. It makes a performance issue where Otherwise, you wouldn't need, you'd be like definitely. I mean, you definitely are one of the best in the team. But this little thing is just, I guess that if you thought about catching an earlier bus, it would make a big difference to, the impression that you make and your performance overall.
Great, thank you, Nathan. So I'd just like to check in with Daphne. How did you feel about receiving that feedback?
Good. It was very nicely delivered.
Okay, and it seems obvious that you were using the feedback hamburger?
Yes, the feedback sandwich.
The feedback sandwich. Okay, so it wasn't a hamburger.
Right? I could have cooked it some more, but we didn't have time.
Okay, so one of the observations that I would make is that you used the words, some people have been noticing.
Yeah.
Okay, so what do we say about feedback? It should be...
Yes, it should be just what I'm...
It should be based on evidence,
yes.
And your own observations, specifically, not hearsay.
Yeah.
One of the cons of the feedback hamburger that personally I don't like is what I call the big but. Yeah. However, I thought you negotiated that quite well. So what I mean by the big but is you say, you're doing a great job, but you're coming to work late. Now, you didn't use any conjunctives that then negative to the following statement, so or the preceding statement. So I thought you managed that quite well. Daphne, would you like to be the deliverer of feedback to Trent?
To Trent.
Okay, so you ready to go? Let me know. You want to have a look at some models?
Have you got it on there?
Oh yeah, right.
You've noticed that Trent is increasingly short-tempered. Oh, and complaints about Trent. Yep. They think I'm rude. Well, they would.
Okay, I'll let you go when you're on time.
Hi Trent, good to see you. How are you?
Hi.
So I've been noticing we've gotten quite a lot of feedback about some of our customers realizing you were a bit short with them.
What?
You may not have been as polite as we expect from our workers.
What sort of feedback?
They're just saying that they didn't feel comfortable using the service and they weren't.
The idiots that ring here. I mean, what do you expect? I mean, I can't be, you can't hold me responsible for that sort of thing.
What I really expect from you, Trent, is that you're kind and patient with our customers. I know some of them may be a bit difficult and it might be hard to keep your temper, but we really need, we really value our customers here, and I'd like you to try and work on maybe adjusting your attitude for them.
Yeah, but some of them are absolutely intolerable. You wouldn't believe the things they ask me. We don't need that sort of customer, surely.
That may be your opinions, but that customer has called us looking for a service.
I suppose so.
Good job. So I think, Daphne, you might have used the beer model. So we talked about the behaviour. You mentioned what I expect from you. You could have talked about what the effect of that behaviour was. So that does come into the beer model, where you would tell Trent that the effect of that is damaging the organisation's reputation. It's making his colleagues unhappy because they feel stressed listening to that side of the conversation. It's definitely making the customers unhappy. And then you went into very clearly explain what the expectation of the role was.
I like that about the expectations. That really, there was no arguing with that. You know what I mean?
And you went straight into it, and it's clear from the scenario that Trent's behaviour is unusually difficult, and you didn't go to any preamble, which I think is exactly the right sort of approach with this particular feedback. Thank you both very much.
Thank you. I tried to be difficult, but I think you put me in my place.
He was being very difficult, I noticed that. Alright, so onwards. Thank you very much both. Managing underperformance, so that leads us from Trent into underperformance. It must be very procedural. You're potentially, unfortunately, in cases of underperformance, you always have to be thinking in the back of your mind that this could go to arbitration or some sort of higher level of management if the staff member perceives that you are perhaps bullying them or they're being treated in a manner that's discriminatory. So keep meticulous records. The reasons for the meeting should have been documented, and they should also be the resolutions. So in this particular case with Trent, you would say your resolution that you would have is that you expect him to be polite to people, and you would write that down, and that would be documented, plus the date and the reasons for the meeting. your team manager, you must have, before you undergo any performance management, you must have the approval of your manager. Please make sure that you've got the support. It's useful to have somebody else look over your judgment as well and say, you know, yes, I agree with you, this person does need performance management, or no, I think you're misinterpreting the situation. Consider what's legal, what's fair. Think about organisational policies as well. There are a lot of policies that should help you. You need to be professional. You need to give that person at least 1 week's notice that they are going to be having this meeting and what it's about. You don't want to spring it on them out of the blue. That's not fair. And you should be empathic. It's a private conversation, but you can allow them to bring along a support person because it's going to be a difficult conversation. That person is not an advocate. Until you go to a higher level or an arbitration situation where they might want an advocate, like a lawyer or somebody, there's just a support person to sit there and basically, metaphorically, hold their hand. And ensure that the team member is aware that there are other people in the organisation they can talk to, wellbeing, code of conduct, all those sorts of things. Further resources, please look at the Equal Opportunity Commission's anti-discrimination laws, the HR manager, my supervisor, the enterprise agreement, so there are clauses in there which cover performance management, the grievance procedure. If the staff member feels that you are bullying them, then they have a right to take it further, and PMS 2018 policy. So, keeping track, we're getting near the end here, so thank you for your patience. What is it that we need to keep track of? That's an excellent question because it's just being covered up by a graphic. We need to keep track of the individual plan and any amendments to the individual plan as a result of the first and second review meetings, or meetings 2 and 3, and the final review. We should really keep track of appraisal records and performance management records and resolutions as discussed previously. They're confidential, but they are legal documents, or they could become legal documents. So what do you think would be a sensible way to store that? In an open file on your desk?
Well, a locked filing cabinet for physical records and a password protected file electronically.
Yep, I think that's quite sensible. It's about respect for somebody's privacy. So monitoring progress. How do we keep track that they're making progress against those objectives or not making progress? The appraisal evaluation tools, whatever you're using, should detail the new objectives. So that should then become part of your regular appraisal method that you're keeping in the back of your mind, that as well as the performance against the role description, here are the objectives that you both agreed to would be suitable objectives for that person. And your evaluation and appraisal should now start to be thinking in terms of, are they working towards making progress against those objectives, performance and development. Don't wait for the next meeting. Like Daphne does, you can do one-on-ones and say, how's it going, but don't badger them, because you wouldn't want to be going, are you making progress against your objectives every week? That could be quite intimidating. Make sure that you're keeping your part of the bargain, keep your promises, give them the support that they need, release them from other duties if that's what you promised to do in order for them to make their objectives work. So, it's your turn again, but you don't have to do another role play. I've given you a handout of the PMS template as well as your other handouts, so that's actually the record for all 4 meetings, but as it may get modified as a result of the second and third meetings. That's for you to take away and think about. Also, if you have any questions about implementation, do you have any for me now? Otherwise, please email or call me, or anyone in HR. We're all well versed in PMS 2018.
So is there a timetable now? Do we have to get this done by any?
Yes, you do. So
what's the date for that?
End of next week. Yeah,
for the whole team?
Yes, so if you could get all your 15 reports, call it mid-May. There is a timetable and it's on the organisational calendar.
Right, okay.
Your manager, your team manager will discuss it further with you about the nuts and bolts about how you're going to roll it out for your particular team. So I would also ask you very kindly if you could please complete 2 surveys. There's on SurveyMonkey. One is about this training that you received today, and the other one is about PMS 2018. If you have no other questions, thank you so much for attending today, and I hope you feel that we've achieved those objectives and you feel confident going forward to implement PMS 2018 with your reports. Thank you.
Well, thank you.